Ben Wikler, thank you so much for joining me.
Stephen, it's a pleasure to be with you today.
Today you're going to tell us how you're going to save the Democratic Party and America from the clutches of whatever party is coming into rule. I don't know what to call them anymore.
The incoming regime.
Yeah.
Team effort is the short answer. It's going to take all of us. It's going to take everybody. Mm-hmm. And it's not just in Washington, D.C. It's in every corner of the country. And it is, whether we like it or not, we're now in a kind of permanent campaign world. And we've got to organize and communicate that way because the right is not sleeping in this moment. And I think there's a lot of people who want to do really bad things to people across the country who see this as their shot. They have total control. They have the Supreme Court, the House, the Senate, the White House, and they want to do as much damage as they possibly can as fast as they can. And we've got to fight it.
I want to ask you two questions that are kind of two sides of the same coin. So the first question is, what is the Democratic Party? What should it be? Because I feel like we've kind of lost our identity as opposed to the conservatives who are MAGA. They from culture to music to everything. And then the second question is, Wisconsin has outperformed other Democratic regions when it comes to election results. What do you think you guys are doing in Wisconsin? What is the messaging there? What are you doing differently there that other Democrats aren't doing, that's selling some idea of what it is to be a Democrat or what that means?
Yeah. Well, I think the first piece is Republicans are actually the party of the far-right ultra-rich. They're the party that, however they campaign, what they actually do when they get in power every single time is massive tax cuts for the wealthiest people in the world and putting judges in place who will side with big corporations against regular people. And they use attacks on culture war issues in order to divide a public that actually generally agrees that we should be a country that works for regular folks. So they try to divide people, and then once they're divided and Republicans win, then they rip everybody off. And Democrats are the party of working people. And that both means people who have a job and people who are the poor, the middle class. It's people who do not have giant bank accounts that can multiply if they tweak the tax code to help the ultra wealthy. And Democrats win when they are fighting in a way that people can see that the Democratic Party is for them. And just to be clear, working class folks they're black, they're white, they're Latino, they're every part of this country. The majority of people are not ultra wealthy, and so this is not. Sometimes people think if you're talking about working people, you're just talking about the white working class. It's a multiracial working class in this country, but we're the party that thinks you shouldn't rig the system for the people at the top, and that's when that comes through to voters and through both in our policies and how we communicate and how we show up, then Democrats win. And I think to go to your second question, I think we've been able to show up and do that in a way that has landed with people in Wisconsin in a particular way. And so I've been the chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin for 6 years. When I ran for chair, Wisconsin was a state that Republicans had rigged for total control. It's a state with a long, progressive history. It also has a history on the far right. The Joe McCarthy, the McCarthyism and HUAC and all that stuff. He was from Wisconsin. And Wisconsin was also the state that had been the first state to reject the Fugitive Slave Act in the Constitution. It was the first state to have workers' compensation, unemployment insurance. Social Security was written by Wisconsinites. It was the first state to ratify equal rights for women, for LGBTQ people, with disability rights. All this stuff came through Wisconsin. But in 2010, Republicans took over. They suppressed votes. They gerrymandered the maps. They changed campaign finance laws. They smashed unions front and center. That was their biggest thing, to smash unions, to basically silence working people in the state. So I moved home in 2018. I was working in D.C. and volunteered on the campaign of Governor Tony Evers, who's our amazing Democratic governor. And my predecessor chair, Martha Lanning, had started a year-round organizing program through the state party that I fell in love with because it involved getting people together to knock on the doors of their neighbors around the state. And I ran for chair because I wanted to build on that. So 2019, I was elected, and we had a far-right majority in our state Supreme Court, near supermajorities in our state legislature. And the Republicans, after we won the Democratic governorship, Republicans held a special session to rip power away from Governor Evers and our Attorney General, Josh Quall, even though the Democrats had just won the election, because Republicans didn't want to cede control. And that infuriated me and lots of people in the state. But it's taken year over year, having organizers on the ground in every part of the state, having a communications team that shows up not just in local TV, which is actually still a pretty big thing across the state, but also online and with streamers and building an alternative kind of progressive media ecosystem and trying to reach out through rural weekly newspapers and Black and Spanish language radio in different parts of Wisconsin, like all these different places where people get information. We communicate all the time, and that allows us to actually communicate what Democrats are doing. And if we just let Republicans explain what Democrats are doing all the time, Republicans will always win because they only tell the stories that help them. So it takes having a permanent campaign to be able to do this. And the result has been, while all the states around us lost Democratic seats in the state legislature in 2024, we finally had won fair maps in our state. We flipped 14 state legislative seats. And while Democratic turnout fell in neighboring states, including Minnesota, we added Democratic votes in Wisconsin. So we had the highest turnout in the country in Wisconsin. And it's true that Republican turnout went up even more, and we lost the presidential race by 0.9 of a point. But because of that organizing and that work, we won the U.S. Senate race, and we won down ballot, and we have a shot at actually winning control of Wisconsin in 2026. And that's, to me, that's the reason why I'm running for DNC chair, is that I've seen the impact that can have on the ground when we do it this way.
So this is something that I struggle with. This is kind of a question around your messaging.
Yeah.
It feels like sometimes we're trapped in this weird world where when Democrats try to talk about Biden's accomplishments legislatively, at the very least, you can't say anything good because they will accuse you immediately of being out of touch and actually everything is horrible and terrible and there's nothing good that you can talk about. So obviously they're going to come and say a bunch of bad stuff. How do you message positively? How do you approach communicating accomplishments without the risk of sounding like you are not hearing people's frustrations or anxieties around housing or inflation?
Yeah, I think there's a weird missing part of the conversation that we have as a country, which is that there were some really, really great things that the Biden administration did on the strength of Democratic votes when it came in that cut the child poverty rate in America in half, for example, with the child tax credit and with these investments that went to, like in Wisconsin, main streets all across the state, like stores opened up because of the pandemic support. But then Republicans killed those pandemic supports. And so, especially if you're like a middle class or working class family across the country, you actually saw your income go down when that support ended. If you had two kids, like if you're making $40,000 a year, you have two kids, that means you're getting $1,000 a month. That's $12,000 a year. That is a huge boost in your income. And suddenly it went away when Republicans killed that support. And it kind of went away with a whimper instead of a bang. And no one ever got the story on the fact that Republicans killed it. And there were two Democratic votes against it. Every other Democrat supported making permanent support for families across the country. So Republicans pulled the rug out, and people saw their income drop, and at the same time prices were going up. And so you had less money to pay for higher prices for eggs and for housing and for medicine, all this stuff. And that, to me, is why people feel like the economy sucks most of all, because income went down for people. And that part of the story is kind of left out when we tell the story of what happened. So Democrats often talk in statistics, and they're amazing statistics, but the actual experience for those statistics are about like wages going up by more than inflation, but actual income, like money that you have like in your wallet or in your bank account, that went down. And it is not a surprise that people felt like they were taking it on the chin. And I think being honest about what just happened can clear the way to really have this conversation, especially given that it's Republicans who ripped away the support that working people were getting. It's not Democrats. Democrats were fighting for the right thing. As we go forward, Republicans are about to go on the attack again. We don't know which of the like 30 terrible ideas they have that they're going to do first. Maybe it's like ending overtime pay or smashing unions nationally, or maybe it's going after Social Security. Maybe it's trying to rip away healthcare again. But they're about to show who they are, and Democrats need to fight in a way that shows who we are and shows who the Republicans are in order to be able to win back trust. And I think that in a way, we've been caught in the exact trap that you talked about when we look back. But going forward, we have a chance to make things really, really clear and to stand arm in arm with the union movement, with people across the country that are fighting for a country that actually works for people.
Okay, I'm going to angle this back to the DNC chair stuff. But one of the huge frustrations that I have, and this kind of ties into how the Democratic Party operates, is it feels like the media environment right now is unwinnable. Yeah. To where if you have a conservative, they can run the whole circuit of conservative podcasts or conservative media, And not only will the media be favorable to them, as we saw with Dominion or Smartmatic, they'll just lie for them. They'll take like direct lies from the campaigns and print them. And then that mentality carries over everywhere for conservatives. And even if I still can't believe I need to go and look this up. The first interview that Trump gave when he came back after winning the election, it was either ABC or CNN or I watched the interview. I don't remember the network. It was a far left liberal media news network, and every interview is softball after softball. Or Trump will lie and they'll say, "Mr. President, I don't think it's true," and they'll lie again. I'm like, okay, next question. Yeah. Meanwhile, when Kamala does that CNN interview with her and Walz, it's like question, follow up, and it's like, oh my God.
Yes.
And I feel like there's such this fear of being afraid on the left of having like Trump derangement syndrome that it makes all the left people really critical of the Democratic candidates in an effort to be fair. And meanwhile, Donald Trump can rattle off the most insane answers to any question ever, and it's either fine, incomprehensible, or it's just epic and awesome and who cares and whatever. How do you even address, or what do you think are like big steps that I guess is like a DNC chair you could take to like remedying that environment?
It's a central generational challenge. The way I think of it is like you have a seesaw, you have this like cluster of mainstream journalists trying to very carefully balance right in the middle, and then you have an elephant jumping on one side of the seesaw, and then like the journalists who are trying to get it right, who are affected by all these other biases around pack mentality and the profit motive, and not pissing off the giant companies and billionaires who own the media. They're like struggling in this sort of straitjacket, and then there's very little progressive media that pushes back on the other side. And then meanwhile, there's a lot of people who never pay attention to any political news because they don't see politics as entertainment. They find it stressful or disgusting or irrelevant. And amidst all that, step one is, I think, building up an independent progressive media ecosystem is something that the Democratic National Committee and the DNC chair can help do by building a war room at the DNC that is actually like pitching guests and breaking news and training and supporting Democratic candidates and communicators to go on progressive podcasts and streamers and different digital news outlets and going to places where there are people that share values that are committed to accuracy and truth, but are actually bringing a different analysis to the conversation, so that there's at least a counterweight to the forces of right-wing media. And then the second thing is that the right does a lot of working the refs. They do a lot of yelling at reporters who report objectively in order to get them to tilt their coverage. And I think as Democrats, we should recognize what Republicans are doing, and we should call it out, and we should urge and push journalists to cover things fairly. And that often means, just making sure that they have lots of information, providing research, providing context, naming when things are tilting towards Republican propaganda, because a lot of Republican propaganda works by Republicans essentially writing stories for people and then serving them up these scoops and different things. I remember growing up, I used to read a magazine called published by Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting, which is like a media watchdog, that covered how corporate PR would do video news releases where they'd write entire stories for local TV news with scripts for the local anchor to read, and then the B-roll would be to serve whatever corporate agenda was being pushed. And the right is doing versions of that all the time to try to define the national conversation. So So one piece is the progressive media. Another piece is like engaging in just day-to-day relentless kind of combat in traditional press. The third thing is, I think, as Democrats, we should train and support and deploy more people to go on conservative media and blow up their narratives. Because if the right goes unchallenged on their turf, then huge numbers of people only hear the far right's perspective. And I think you can see that like in the way that Pete Buttigieg goes on Fox News. And there's a lot of folks that have gone on conservative turf in a way that I think is productive if you do it right. But you have to have an actual strategy for how to do it. And then the last piece I'd say is the huge, much bigger universe of places that are not fundamentally about politics, but ultimately shape how people think about politics. And that's, people doing podcasts and streaming about sports or video games or beauty or fashion or the home renovation, like all these things, financial management, there's gigantic audiences for podcasts and different shows about how to manage your money. And the right is actually trying to feed stuff in to create the impression that that the economy was terrible in general, or that that Democratic policies can screw people over. And we should be in that conversation and actually spreading some truth so we don't cede that territory to the right. If you look at there's just a different culture of press here, and it is very pushed by corporate incentives, and you can see that really actively right now in the way that the big media companies are bending over backwards to placate Trump. And as Democrats, we need to intentionally be building a counterweight as well as engaging with the landscape that's out there and going on offense.
So a really challenging question is, how do you build that counterweight without it being like just as immoral, I guess, as the other side? One really frustrating thing is, like, I'll call this out a lot. Like, these guys will just lie. It's not even like they're helping them. They're just, they'll all be complicit in all of the same sets of lies. And I'll say, like, well, we need to fight on our side. And it's like, wait, are you saying that we should lie too? And it's like, no, we shouldn't. But man, after Bill Clinton, after Al Gore, the election loss, after losing the Supreme Court pick, at some point, like, I've got a lot of friends who are like, we need to pack the court, kill the filibuster. We have to do all these extreme things. Is there ever a point where it becomes like untenable? Like, what are our biggest tools that we have right now to kind of like fight back on our side?
Harry Truman had this line, they say I give him hell, but I just tell the truth and it feels like hell. And the truth is our greatest weapon. And you asked the question about how do you fight disinformation. There's a ton of research that what you don't do is you don't repeat the lie and then debunk it. You actually have to lead with the truth. You lead with the true thing because the first thing you say is the thing that people remember and then lead with. And once you say the truth, then you can say, and the other side is lying about it because da-da-da-da-da. But leading with the truth is our most powerful thing. And we have great truth. Like, truth is really good on our side because we're actually trying to build a country that works for working people. The other side is the one trying to break that kind of country, to rig things for people at the top. So when we explain that that Democrats like bring down taxes for working families and bring up support, we want to expand Social Security instead of privatizing it. We want to fund public schools, and Republicans are trying to shred them and privatize them. That's all stuff that is true. We can back that up, and Republicans generally start lying and going on defense when we do that because they know that what they stand for is actually profoundly unpopular. But as Democrats, what we need to get a lot better at is expressing things in language that actually is how people talk about stuff in their actual lives. We use a lot of acronyms, we use a lot of percentages, we use a lot of like 6-point plans, and making things really simple and plain and clear, and explaining who it is who rigged the system and who benefits from a an economy that often is about maximizing profits for people who already have billions of dollars. Like, explaining that builds trust and credibility because it starts with honesty and clarity. And sometimes it pisses people off, and that has to be okay. I think that one of the things about media bias and also about human brains is that media tracks conflict. There has to be a fight for people to pay attention. If you just say, I want to do this good thing, and no one objects, then it's actually too boring for anyone to pay any attention. And so I think for Democrats, sometimes you have to be willing to lean into a conflict where the right is going to get pissed off and provoked and react and push back on the other side. And that's where if you have 100 people on a playground and 2 people start fighting, everyone clusters around those 2 people. And Democrats need to be the ones picking fights around things that actually matter to people in real life if we want to shift attention from the fights that Republicans are constantly trying to pick, which are about dividing people. And I think that's a shift in how we think about how we communicate that we're going to have to embrace in this era where so many of the megaphones are controlled by the richest people in the world who are trying to rig the country against everyone else. Yeah,
one of the big issues that I see a lot in the media, there's a guy that does alternative media stuff, Brian Tyler Cohen, who he calls it the both sides media.
Yes.
And it's this frustrating thing where on the right, it's never both sides. Not only is it never both sides, like you'll notice that the only time we really learned the names of people in an administration is when it was Trump's presidency, because it's never Trump's fault. Yep. It's somebody else in his administration's fault. It's either Comey's fault or it's Fauci's fault. But then when it's somebody in Biden's administration, it's Biden's government. It's Biden's administration.
Yes.
Like I'll hear people say, like 2020 was the worst year for misinformation ever. It's like, well, who was president? But they never say that.
Yeah.
How do you how do you get the media to have more of a backbone when we talk about profit incentives? Conservatives have successfully cast themselves as David and Goliath simultaneously, where you have, they pretend to be the underdog, and Fox News is massive.
Yes.
And then as soon as you feed into, or not feed into, but as soon as you try to fight against these conservative narratives at all, it seems like you get labeled with that's Trump derangement syndrome, and that's not true. And, you don't even know what Republicans believe in anymore. They'll say, like, well, we don't want big money interests in, but Elon is actually really cool, and we're really happy that he bought X, and, and the fact
Maybe
that
you should buy TikTok. There
yeah,
you go.
like I have for the first time in my life, I've got conservatives in my social media things, because I'm fighting against, because Zuckerberg has come out and has now said, well, Biden pressured us for all this and that. It's like, where's the evidence? He's not posting. Like, where's the actual truth of this? Yeah. And for the first time, I'm seeing conservatives say, what, you don't believe Mark Zuckerberg? And I'm like, what, and you do? Like, yeah, that the environment is just so rough. What do you think, as a DNC chair, like, what capacity do you think you have to build out both mainstream, because it is still important, because whenever people say, like, oh, the mainstream media, they're not talking about Fox, they're talking about CNN and MSNBC. Right. How do you build out that relationship with the mainstream media and kind of like more alternative media figures?
So you have to have an all-of-the-above strategy, but it starts with having a war room that has people that are familiar with this. And I will say, the fragmentation of where people's attention goes, it is by generation, it is across race and ethnicity, it is across geography, and you need to pay attention to all that. And that means having people in the room who actually like spend their time in all these very different worlds, who are thinking about how to communicate and show up effectively. And then you go out and work to find and build and train communicators who can show up authentically, in these very different environments, and then you like support pitching them. And the thing that I think that, for better or worse, what Trump is about to do, whatever that thing is, and there's going to be a lot of those things, but almost certainly he's going to try to pass a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut for billionaires. Like, that is on the agenda for this year, because his last tax cuts are going to expire, and Congress has to either decide to let the biggest tax cuts for the wealthiest people expire, which Republicans won't do, or try to pass them again, in which they will do. So there'll be a fight over trillions of dollars, whether it should go to the ultra-rich or to anything else. And that is a fight we know is going to happen. And that will give us a chance to lean in and try to define this fight. And the right is going to squeal and it's going to freak out. And what typically happens in fights like this, Fox News doesn't even cover them. They try to change the topic to anything else, because these are when the right kind of takes off its mask and just tries to like grab money from working people and hand it to the ultra rich. Republicans get divided. Like, most Republicans don't like this kind of stuff. It makes the power brokers in the Republican Party freak out to have any focus on it. And we need to make it unignorable. And we do that through organizing and protest. We do that through how we communicate. We do that through who's communicating about it. We do that through making sure that people who are directly affected are telling their stories to Republicans in ways that the media can't ignore. We did that in the healthcare fight in 2017, when they tried to take away healthcare from tens of millions of people. And we're going to have to gear up for that kind of fight again. I used to work at MoveOn.org. MoveOn, the .org cleaner, was taken off the name. And MoveOn, we have a multi-million person email list, and we'd email everyone when the Republicans were trying to pass these healthcare repeal bills, and then organize them to go to Republican offices in their legislative districts and show up and have protests and go to Republican town halls and tell the story about what would happen to them if they lost their health care because of the Republican bills. And that became the dominant story in the news, and then became the biggest story in the election in 2018. And this is with tons of partners and allies, especially people with disabilities who were going to lose their Medicaid coverage, who would show up and make just unignorable the fact that Republicans were trying to hurt real people in order to help the super rich and big insurance companies. And that, again, it goes to this point about the fight. The right operates under a set of rules that is just about compounding power for the most wealthy and powerful people in the world. And that is the terrain on the landscape. And if we're not realistic about that, and they're just going to keep rolling over us, we need to fight basically asymmetrically in a way that uses what we've got, which is real people who are affected by their policies, who are fighting for something better, and the ability to point out who benefits when they pull this stuff. But it is not easy at all, because of exactly what you talked about. Like, the right controls the biggest media engines in the country, and to defeat that, we have to be really creative about how we organize, and we have to show up relentlessly in places where Republicans don't expect us to.
Do you ever worry that sometimes people say things, but that's not actually what they want, that they're meaning something completely different? So, for example, I look at the conservative side, and I hear over and over again that pressuring the media, or pressuring alternative media, is a bad thing to do with, say, the FBI. A lot of people point to the Twitter files, which didn't say there was huge pressure from the FBI, but they'll say the fact that the FBI was even in communications with Twitter in and of itself was enough to show that there was pressure. Meanwhile, me, along with every other person, on the Democratic side in the country, was making fun of Mark Zuckerberg for essentially bending the knee to Trump. However, Trump was asked at a press conference, do you think he did this because of your threats? And Trump said yes. And Trump was on Truth Social literally saying, and I think in his book he also said, it's going to be prison for life for these people.
Yeah.
But then when you talk to a conservative about it, the party has moved so far. Before, they would at least kind of play coy about it. But now the answer always feels like when they're doing something that I thought they were opposed to, they'll say, well, you guys did it anyway, so it's on our side. So actually, I don't care about this. How do you figure out which issues to message on when it seems like maybe they don't care as much about it, or maybe they do, and the messaging could change it? Like for the ultra wealthy, like George Soros was supposed to be the worst guy in the world, but Elon Musk, there was an event where he happily said, "Well, I'm your guys as George Soros," and everybody's clapping, and it's like, okay, so I guess that's good then. Like what?
The reality is this is always just about power.
Yeah.
On the right, it is always about, they complain about process when they can't complain about substance, and like it's always a charade. This is about, they want the power to do things to everyone else, and they don't want anyone else to do anything to them. There was someone who tweeted, conservatism is about the idea that there are some people that are protected by the law but not bound by it, and there are some people that are bound by the law but not protected by it. And that's basically at the heart of how the right operates. And for Democrats and for the, I think, vast majority of people who either are Democrats or share values with Democrats and might not affiliate with either party, we actually think there should be, one set of rules that applies to everybody. That there shouldn't be some people that are above the law. But for conservatives, it's actually about, you people should follow these laws and do what I say, and I should not have to do anything. I should not be bound by anything. It is unconstrained power. And you see that with the way that Elon Musk runs Twitter, right? It is, he started saying, oh, we need to be the free speech platform. You can say absolutely anything. And then he bans anyone he doesn't like. Like it is just about him exercising power and control. So I think that the big thing for us is not to get suckered in by their claims that they are caring about fairness or decorum or whatever. The thing that is most critical for us is to go to substance of what actually affects people's lives. And that's where I think Republicans can pull us off course, because complaining about their rule violations or the way they're trying to have it both ways is often a distraction from the things that directly affects people. And that's one of the things that, if I'm the DNC chair, that I want to do. And I want to work with folks in states. I want to work with unions. I want to, when Republicans are legalizing wage theft and making it so that you can not pay workers the money that they're owed, or making it so you don't have to pay for overtime pay, which is something Biden was great on, is making sure that people could get overtime who were working overtime. When Republicans are trying to smash unions, stuff like that directly affects people in their pocketbook, that Republicans are terrible on, that we make that a fight that Republicans have to answer for. Because there's a lot, unless you're really tracking this stuff super closely, the hypocrisy arguments are often hard to sort out, right? Because you did this and you did this, and who said this first, and da-da-da-da-da. But everyone's an expert on their own life. Everyone's an expert on whether they just got screwed. And everyone knows how much they just paid for their food, or whether they had to break pills in half because they couldn't afford to fill their prescription. And there are people who want the public to talk about anything but those things. They want to cloak all that in all kinds of mysterious economics, and then they want to make the conversation about something else. And I think bringing it back to those fights where the vast majority of this country is on the same page against the people trying to rig the system to rip people off, that is a source of strength for us. And when we can bring it to that stuff, the reason why young people can't afford houses in the country, the reason why it's so incredibly expensive to get a higher education, the reason why the reason why it can feel like the economy is rigged against you, when we go to that, that's actually a source of unity and strength for us across people who might disagree with us about other politics, across people who have all kinds of different skin colors, and maybe we're raised speaking a different language. Everyone needs the basic necessities of life, and that's the basis to me for building solidarity that allows us to make progress on everything else.
What do you see the role of the DNC chair being for? Do you think that is a role that is involved in the politics of the states and of the country, or do you think it's a role that's involved in empowering people who are involved in those things? How do you see increasing visibility to the chair, for example, and then picking which fights to have? Yeah,
so I think that the DNC chair is going to play a really important role in when there's a fight that unites Democrats and brings people who hate politics over toward Democrats and divides Republicans, because Republicans are trying to rip off the country or rig things for a few people at the top, that a DNC chair can help to communicate and help to bring a spotlight to that. And that's something that I've done a lot in Wisconsin. I did a lot when I was at Move On, and that's something that I'm really fired up to do as we go forward now if I'm elected DNC chair. It is also about setting the vision and strategy for a party that needs to build a whole bunch of capacity. Like we need to have people on staff who can help get a whole bunch of other people out into the press, who can help to build war rooms in states to be able to fight these fight in states after states. So one part is communication, one part is like strategy and management. And in Wisconsin, we have the biggest state party on the Democratic side in the country, and we've sometimes have hundreds of staff. We always have dozens of staff, and what those staff do is they build like neighborhood teams to go have conversations with people. They build organizing programs so people are reaching out to their friends, and sometimes that's face to face, and sometimes that's through group chats and all the different places that people interact. And then we build a communications operation, and we track what Republicans are doing and saying, so we can actually expose that to people. And we have all this work that builds the roads essentially that the candidates drive their cars on, because it helps every Democrat. When you increase Democratic turnout, people are going to vote for all these different offices, and you carry that forward from election to election. I think that you have to build essentially a strategy in each state that is tailored to the fights in that state, that is built around the laws in that state and who the candidates are, what the fight is with our partners and allies and with the union movement. And if we build that in each state, that also takes a lot of fundraising. And part of how you do fundraising effectively, in my view, is by explaining what you're going to do. And that is, through the press and through your email list or whatever, and then doing it and building trust by actually showing that you can win and deliver results. I want to get it. So, fundraising, mobilization, communication, that's the kind of like core of the DNC chair's job, but it has to be in the context of fights that actually matter to people if we're going to win elections.
What do you think has hampered the DNC the most so far in getting that done?
I think that part of it is that when there's a Democratic president, then the DNC is kind of a political arm of the White House, and that's I'm really grateful for Jamie Harrison as the current DNC chair, his leadership and his really hard work. But often, decisions are made by someone else, not by the DNC chair, and that changes when we don't have the White House. And with all respect to folks who are making decisions along the way now, we're in a different moment, and we need a different group of people to come in and make sure that the consultants that the party is working with are actually focused on people who represent all the communities that we need to fight in and have experience in all these different platforms and all these different places we communicate. And it's going to be a more diverse group of people that is more spread out across the country. It's not just a handful of shops in Washington, D.C. And then it should all be built around how we build a plan to win in all these fights across the country that often people have never heard of, like state Supreme Court races. We have one in Wisconsin on April 1st, which is going to be incredibly important. If Republicans get control, they'll rig the state again. If there's a ongoing kind of pro-democracy majority, then Wisconsin could become a blue state in 2026. In North Carolina, they had a state Supreme Court that flipped to the Republicans flipped it, and then they rigged that state so much that Democrats lost 3 U.S. House seats, and Republicans have a House majority right now. And that's not the kind of race that is a huge priority traditionally for the DNC. But I think those kinds of races matter enormously. State legislative races, attorney general races, like these things have enormous consequences down the road. And building a focus that is built out in each state, where we are raising money and spending money in a way that reflects how we win at all those different levels at once, that's an essential part of what the DNC needs to do. So that's, it is different from how it's been for the last 4 years, and it's going to take a lot of building and a lot of work. But I think that'll be energized by actually people getting the feeling and the experience of being in fights where they can see the impact of their work and their money and their blood and sweat and tears, being part of something bigger than yourself, and then actually making a difference and feeling like you were part of winning that election, and then seeing the change that comes from it. That's what gets people to stay involved in politics.
I guess one of the things that a lot of people are feeling after the election is very doomer, not good in terms of feeling. If you were trying to get more involved, or if you were giving advice to people who want to get more involved, what do you think are the punchiest areas that people could put their time into to not have that sinking feeling of dread for the incoming regime? In Florida, they managed to change our referendum rules. So even though the majority of the state voted in favor of bringing back abortion, which you would think is what a referendum is about, they had it so it was a 60% cutoff. It just feels like there's thing after thing after thing. Yeah, what is the advice you give to people for getting involved and not feeling horrible? This is
the rigging of the system, and it's intended to have that effect, is to make people believe and make it real that they don't have any power. And if you feel powerless, the first thing you should do is get some power, right? And so the way that you do that is by choosing fights where if everyone does everything they can, then you can win. And I think the DNC chair can help to identify those fights across the country, and then like if you're wherever you might live, I would say join your state Democratic Party. It's actually like every state party has a website with a join button, and you can join, and there's like meetings. You can find out what the fights are that are coming up and what's going on. But also, I mean, if you're tuning in here to Destiny, you're going to hear about fights that are going on, and I think we know that like every Tuesday there's an election somewhere, and like, January 7th, there were elections in Virginia for the state legislature that determined the majority of the state legislature in that state. And there's virtual phone banking that you can join from anywhere. And you're calling voters and you're talking to them about the election. It takes a little while to read up on what's going on, but then you call and check in, and you'll find a couple of people who didn't know there was an election, and you can help them decide to vote, make a plan to vote, and then they vote, and then we won those elections. April 1st in Wisconsin, Brad Schimmel, extremist politician, was the right-wing attorney general for 4 years, and defended gerrymandering, the abortion ban, versus Susan Crawford, who's a great common sense judge. That'll determine the majority in the state Supreme Court in Wisconsin. That is April 1st. And anyone can get involved in volunteering for that right now. You can go to wisdems.org/volunteer, and you can do that. And if you're on Blue Sky and you follow a bunch of political accounts, you're going to find out about fights that are coming up, and you're going to find out about ways that you can volunteer in those fights. And it feels really good. It feels really good to actually take action on something that is bigger than yourself. And then, even if Trump is doing the worst stuff in the world, if you help to break a Republican supermajority in a state, your state or some other state, if you help to flip a mayorship and have somebody who, actually believes in a city that works for regular people in some city, whether it's your own or someplace else, that feeling of being part of something bigger than yourself, I think, is the best way to address that kind of hopelessness. Because hopelessness often fundamentally is a feeling of powerlessness. And when you discover that you actually have the power, the people who show up are the only ones who have power in these kinds of fights. Most people don't do it, which means that the people who do, they have much more power than by any right they should have. And it's going to be election after election this year, this fall, Virginia, New Jersey, and a whole bunch more, all the way through in 2026, 27, 28. There's just a huge number of ways that you can get involved in those battles. And if you're choosing the ones where, with our powers combined, we can actually win, then you'll have the experience of being part of a victory that delivers change.
Okay. Comment and then question.
Yeah.
So quick comment. Okay. For whoever wins this race, my God, I wish it was easier for people to get involved.
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's a lot of energy, and it's just really hard to know who, like, where do I go? What do I actually do? Like, where do I sign up? So if the DNC can be involved in anything, having those channels open would be so helpful.
Yeah, 100%.
And then, challenging question. One thing that I notice is very frustrating is everybody on the right and the center, huge air quotes there, it's so crazy because they will talk about how illegals are stealing the elections, mail-in ballots are rigged, everything is rigged, all this stuff is against you. But for some reason, it's like the most motivating thing in the world for them to go out and vote. It feels like there's an issue where it's sad to say this, but like I feel kind of like a nerd when I go even on left-leaning shows, and it's like, yeah, I'm voting for Harris or for Biden 100%. For Biden initially and for Harris, like, yeah, 100%. It feels like there's sometimes a lot of energy around left-leaning causes, but it ends up feeling demotivating. Like, no matter who we vote for, the war in Gaza is not going to end, or no matter who you vote for, they're all rigged and corrupt, and they're all bureaucrats, and nobody will change anything. Do you know if there's a way, or have you thought about, like, how do you bring some of kind of like that further left-leaning stuff more in line with, listen, we understand that you might be frustrated with the party or things that's going on, but at the end of the day, it can't be a question of nobody, or not like it. There has to be some support. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I think that it actually comes back to choosing, zeroing in on fights where it's very clear who wins is going to affect something that is a fundamental concern that somebody has. And a lot of activist energy is often around fights that are not like one party has the answer that people are looking for. And so that's what's super demotivating, because it can feel like using politics to try to achieve that goal is just not going to work. And you can protest in the street, maybe that's not going to work either. And at the same time, there are absolutely questions that directly affect things that people really deeply care about, where getting involved can determine the outcome. And I'm sort of drawn to those fights like a moth to a flame. Like fighting Wisconsin, we had an abortion ban from before the Civil War that after the Dobbs decision suddenly, like, in effect came into effect because no one knew if it was going to be legally enforceable. So every abortion provider in Wisconsin stopped providing abortion care in our state, and people had to like leave the state of Wisconsin to be able to access care. And there were protests and there was marching. And then it was like, if we can win the state Supreme Court race in 2023, if we can reelect Governor Evers and Attorney General Call and stop Republican supermajority, there's a path to getting this shut down. And so we were able to channel all the energy into that. And then it actually worked. And then that law is now tied up in court, and it's going to go to the state Supreme Court. They heard arguments about it, and there's a very real chance that abortion ban gets totally thrown out. And I think, if you're for you as a streamer that is communicating to tons of people, like spotlighting those kinds of fights where the outcome in elections is actually going to determine the outcome, and that people do genuinely, deeply, like really care about it. A lot of like those things are always on the line, and usually they're not on the front page. And I think the way to get to build trust that it actually means something to get involved in politics is to be able to point really concretely to things that will be affected and determined by what happens in an election. And there are tons of them all the time, and they usually just don't get very much coverage. And it is when I think about how to sustain my own energy doing this work, like I think about like kids who have asthma that can't afford inhalers. Their families can't afford inhalers. And my senator, Tammy Baldwin, who we just reelected, she went after the drug companies that had massively jacked up the prices and got them to bring them down, just basically by asking them, why did the price go up so much? And implicitly threatening that the government would actually do something about it. And there are kids, my kids have asthma. Like there's kids whose lives are going to be directly affected by whether you have someone in power who sees it as their job to show up for regular people, or who just sees it as their job to like take down orders from the biggest corporations in the world. And that, like, I think that there's someone wrote once about the corruption of powerlessness, which is like when you feel like you have no power to affect anything, then it's easy to spin out into conspiracy theories or to just be absolutely cynical and critical about everything. When you find where your power is, when you find where you actually have leverage, then it can create a sense of like, oh my God, given that I have this power, like I have to use it to actually do something good. Like with even a little power comes even a little responsibility, and it is such an easy thing to like get trapped in feeling like you have no power. But there's so much that affects people in such massive ways that everyone who is tuning in this right now has power to affect. And how we respond to the Trump administration in our own states and where we live and how we get involved in politics, that is going to be our leverage. And that's, I think, bringing attention to those fights where if all of us get together, we can contain the damage and build something better. That's the place where we find hope and a reason to actually get involved.
I think the social media has made it so all of the politicking in this country has become very national focused, and people, like you said, don't realize like how important your state's attorney general or Supreme Court or New York Court of Appeals or your governor is. Like, these are really important positions. Why you over any of the other people running? People are coming from a variety of backgrounds. People have a variety of ideas for the DNC. Obviously, everybody kind of wants to take it. Everybody wants to go different from where it is now, basically. Yeah. Why? What do you think makes you uniquely qualified for the role?
I think my unique qualification is that I have been on the front lines in a fight in a state that was rigged to turn into a bright red state, and I've been unrigging it. That it's essentially about track record, which I think speaks to the way that I engage in these fights. I'll say, before I was the state chair in Wisconsin, being involved in this massive uprising that defeated the number one policy priority for the Trump administration, which was to gut the Affordable Care Act and gut Medicaid. That was a fight we were supposed to lose on day one of the Trump administration. They had already practiced passing the bill under Obama, who vetoed it. They had the votes. They had this game plan. Trump had said he was going to do it on day one. And it was a massive uprising of millions of people that stopped them. And that became the number one issue in the 2018 elections. And I was like right at the heart, working with this giant coalition of amazing allies and partners in the fight against repealing the Affordable Care Act. We're going to have fights like that. And I think I'm unique in this race in having worked with unions and with the Democratic Party and with the disability rights movement and with just people all across the country who took their power into their own hands and fought back against that and channeled that and mobilized that and communicated that in a way that defeated Trump's biggest priority and helped protect healthcare for tens of millions of people. And then I went home to Wisconsin, which had been rigged for Republican control, and I got to work with, again, thousands of people on the ground across the state to build a state party that has become a bigger and more powerful presence on the ground than any state party across the country. And that's partly because the stakes are so big, but also I think I've been able to bring this kind of energy to it that's helped us quintuple fundraising on top of the very strong fundraising that my predecessor, Chair Martha Lanning, did. That fundraising that is based on energizing and nationalizing and engaging people in seeing how, if they get involved, we can fight in a place where the stakes are so massively high, that allows us to mobilize tens of thousands of volunteers to fight in local races every year, in judicial races, state legislative races, congressional Senate races, and move Wisconsin from being to the right of the national popular vote in the previous two elections now to being more Democratic than the national popular vote in this election. Even while neighboring states like Minnesota were getting more Republican. They had double the swing that Wisconsin had in the last election to the right, that we were flipping 14 state legislative seats while other states were losing them. And I think that my track record of being able to supercharge institutions and work with partners and allies to really build movements that move the needle in impossible fights, that's what the DNC needs, and that's what I want to do at the DNC. So that's the reason why I'm running. I have not dreamed of running for years and years of being DNC chair, but I feel like I'm ready to contribute something in this moment that can help to unleash energy from millions of people across the country. And this no shade on the other candidates, and I think everyone's in this because they want to make a difference. But the State Chairs Association that my fellow candidate leads has kind of been in a battle within the Democratic Party for, is it state parties, is it the rest of the party, but it hasn't gone out to the public and said, hey, everyone, we need to go and get involved in this fight to supercharge this work to be able to make a difference on the things that we all care so profoundly about. And to me, that taking this fight public and getting millions of people involved, that's what we need as a Democratic Party if we're going to be able to win elections.
My demographic is composed a lot of a demographic that it feels like the Democrats are kind of losing a lot, young men, especially white men, although the last election saw a slide for Latino men as well. Do you think that there's anything in particular? I know that there's always like championing working class stuff and stuff that makes all of America great, but do you think there's anything in particular that the Democratic Party needs to kind of like alter their message a bit on when it comes to that demographic of like younger white men that feel like the Democratic Party is just not for me anymore? Like I feel like conservatives are the only one, the Ben Shapiros and the Jordan Petersons are the only ones talking to me anymore. Yeah,
I think as a Democratic Party, a big part of speaking to men is about honoring people's their goals and their aspirations and their drive to become something and to create something and to do something in life. And that a lot of kind of influencer content for men is about lifting and about hustling and about doing things and about pursuing dreams and goals. And as Democrats, I think Democrats can spiral into what you're supposed to not do, and how to make space for people and how to honor other people, and all that's vitally important. It's also not the driving force in people's lives. People's lives, they're pursuing goals that they have and dreams that they have and visions that they have, and being a party that honors and respects that, I think is a way of, especially speaking to men in a language that often I think as Democrats we've lost sight of. If you think about the great things that Democrats have done, like the GI Bill, so people returning from World War II, they could go and get higher education, and support for people getting, pursuing their dream of home ownership and things like that, have been about connecting to the aspirations that people have. And when we think about fighting for working people, it's not just about making sure there's a floor that people won't fall under so people can get the food and medicine and stuff that they need. It's also about making sure there's actually a staircase that you can walk up to build the kind of life that you want to lead. And I think that so often, the way that the far right tries to rig the economy is actually to pull up the ladder. It's to make it so that people who dream of building a business or building wealth for their families, or who want to do something and be something in the world, can't do it because they've locked things in for a tiny group of monopolies and the kind of incumbents at the expense of everyone else. And actually, I think the Democratic message at our best really responds to people dreaming big things and trying to go for it and fight for something and make something happen. And I think we can do a lot better in how we speak to that. And I think we should be a party where people can be ambitious and have dreams and not feel like the Democratic Party is trying to push them away.
Yeah, I get really angry at the messaging issue seems so big that you'll have something like the Affordable Care Act, which Trump came in 2017 and wanted to unplug on day one, and now you've got them almost trying to take credit for it. Like pre-existing conditions are great. 100%. Yeah, and it's like, what? And or you've got Trump's, one of the biggest things he's talked about are tariffs and being more competitive on trade with Mexico and Canada, and he's the one that renegotiated NAFTA. And for some reason, nobody talks about that. Like, so they hate the things they've done. They try to take credit for the things that we've done.
This actually, it goes to this point, right? Which is the Affordable Care Act. Part of what was such a big deal about it was people were trapped in jobs that they hated, and they couldn't try to start a business because they couldn't buy health insurance as individuals.
This is so true, and nobody even remembers this. I'm 36. Nobody remembers that being the case of, like, I had a manager at McDonald's who was a type 1 diabetic, and I would always ask him, because that guy he didn't care at all about his job. Yeah. And I'm like, why don't you go somewhere else? He's like, I'm type 1 diabetic, bro. I'm locked here for life. Nobody even remembers that anymore.
Right. It seems like another planet. And Republicans want to send us back to that world where people are chained to can I say bullshit jobs?
Whatever you want, yeah.
To where people are chained to bullshit jobs because they need health insurance and they can only get it through their employer. It was a way of locking people in, often to things that they hated. And Republicans fought tooth and claw to keep that world, to keep those rules, to keep those chains on people. And Democrats broke those chains. Like the Democrats passed with no Republican votes and a constant Republican attempt to rip these programs away, a federal guarantee that a health insurance company could not deny you health insurance just because you had a pre-existing condition. And that allowed people, millions of people, to start their own businesses, to leave jobs they hated and find ones that they liked better without worrying that they would suddenly be totally up a creek if they got sick. And that is that's a commitment to freedom that is at the heart of how Democrats think that our economy should work, that you shouldn't live in constant fear of having things fall apart in a way that traps people into not actually following the dreams and the kind of lives they want to lead. And it just makes me so mad when Republicans use rhetoric around freedom when they're trying to basically rip freedom away from working people through economic systems of control. And that's where Republican union busting comes into play. That's where Republican policies on just about everything that relates to our working lives, which is a big part of our life that also affects all the other parts of our life.
And the social things too. Like, are we going to be checking like women going across state borders to see if they're pregnant or not? Or, the feds who supposedly caused January 6th and are, trying to attack conservatives everywhere, the same feds, these are the ones that you're going to expand, tens of thousands of agents for to go and find out all the illegal immigrants to deport them. Like the guys that you didn't trust before, you're now going to massively expand. Yeah. And it's so frustrating.
Yeah. One thing after another. And I think that actually the demonstrating, communicating about how we actually believe in freedom, and Republicans don't. They want control over your life. That is a way that we can communicate to men and women, to everybody in this country, about whose side we're on. And that to me is this elemental question that Republicans are constantly trying to blur the lines on and change the goalposts on, because they actually are not for the things that the vast majority of people in this country want.
Yeah, I hope that one thing that changes going forward, and I saw this, and who's to say, worldwide inflation hurt everybody, and maybe Kamala given more time, or maybe the Democrats given an open primary, maybe things would have gone differently. One thing that I really did, it was a personal point of pride, and it was a point of American pride, was the Democratic Party was, for the first time, very positive in terms of the messaging, in terms of being pro-America, pro the troops, pro everything else. Like it felt more positive. And I feel like historically, when Democrats talk about things, it feels like we always talk about everything as like a punishment. And like I like in debating people, like I'll argue, like somebody will talk about like, what do you think our taxes should be? And it's like, whatever the social programs we have, those are the ones that we should tax people to fund. And like that's a good thing, right? We're enabled to do so many amazingly expensive things, wealthy things. We make so much money. We've got so many people that are standing on the shoulders of everybody else working in society. And you'd rather have people who are happy and healthy and have secure jobs than people who are, trying to revolt against you because the working poor, can't afford the basic necessities. That's a good thing for all of us,
Yes. This is the big thing, is it is both our value and it's also true that we all do better when we all do better. That like when we have a growing, thriving economy, then we can afford to make a environmentally sustainable economy, and we can innovate with clean energy in a way that can affect the entire world. And when we actually make sure that folks can get a great education, then they dream up ideas and create progress and create great companies of tomorrow. And when we stop a tiny group of people from monopolizing everything, then you can have 100 more things bloom. Like all those things are pro-America, pro the best stories of American greatness. And I do think that we can trap ourselves in in being critical, and criticism is a stimulus to do better, and there's an important part of that. But the core of this actually does come from a love of this country and a belief in people, and that I think what draws people to us as a Democratic Party, which I'm hoping to be the chair of, has to fundamentally come from a place of optimism and belief and love and a dream for something better. It can't fundamentally be about shaming ourselves for being bad. It has to come from the joy that comes from doing something that is great that people want to be part of. No one wants to go to a pity party. People want to go to the good party that is actually fun to be there, and the music's great and people are having an amazing time. And that's the kind of country that we want to build, and that's the kind of party the Democratic Party should be trying to build.
Thank you very much for joining me, Ben. Is there any other things you want my audience to know, anybody that's listening to know, if you make it as a DNC, whatever, what do you want to say, I guess, final message?
Stephen, I appreciate it. I hope this isn't our last conversation. And I think what I'd urge people to do, if they're trying to figure out what party actually is on their side and what party they want to be part of, look at what the Democrats near you are actually doing and what Republicans are trying to do and whose side they're actually on, and then get involved in a campaign and meet the people and find out whether they're people who actually share your values and dreams and hopes for what's going to come next. There's this incredible rush that comes from being part of a campaign and a political change, and then being part of a fight that seems like, oh my God, how could this possibly win? And then you win, and it sucks when you lose. And we just lost the last election, and if you're a Democrat and you're dispirited by that, I totally get it. And another fight is coming. There are a whole lot of fights coming, and this is actually the time to get plugged in. The greatest moments in Democratic history often come out of the worst. The Great Depression gave rise to the New Deal, and the era that is to come is maybe the era when we can make this country the greatest that it's ever been. Let's do that together. If you're a DNC member and you're listening right now, I'd love your vote. And whoever you are, you have a place in this fight.
Ben Wikler, thank you so much. Good luck in the race.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, that's being invaded by illegals. That state is now okay for Meta to move its headquarters to.
Yeah, again, you're going to, by your logic, you're going to ground zero. Why would you expose the company, and all of the employees to that sort of like danger? Or a Florida resident or just a conservative in general. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, every state has its problems, but again, I'm just thinking to myself, going back, imagine just Democrats like shit talking red states the way that conservatives shit talk blue states or blue cities. Like it's unfathomable.
I don't know if I could do it. It's rough. Like, making fun of the firefighter dude was one thing because at least he was at a Trump rally. But like, for them to shit on people in California who have these like crazy wildfires, like, could we do the same thing with people in Florida or Georgia or any of the Carolinas over the hurricane stuff? Like, oof.
I live in North Carolina, so I'd be pretty biased.
Yeah.
I'd rather not have that. But no, I mean, no, it just doesn't cross our minds to do shit like that. But
and Biden was so on top of all of the aid,
emergency declarations,
everything.
It was quick,
and even for North Carolina, after the hurricane under Obama, a year later when they were still requesting federal aid, Trump was approving like 1% of it.
Yeah. When you mean Trump? Yeah.
I think the hurricane, it was Harvey, right?
Well, yeah, I guess it must have been because Harvey, I think, was like 2016.
It was 2016, but the rebuild was taking a long time, and under Trump's admin, when they tried to approve
Yeah, so I probably pay too much attention to my reply guys because it's fun sometimes to like go back and spar with them. I get this bad habit from Pisco if he's watching. But one of them earlier this morning was talking about that. He's like, what? Democrats play games with funding as well. And they cited an example with Hurricane Harvey, but it was like total bullshit. And then he went back and deleted the post. So, no, I got him there. Listen, fantastic interview. Mostly because of Ben Wikler, but you were also...
I mean, I made him look good.
You did.
Mm-hmm. It is really annoying. Well, never mind. I was going to troll, but I probably shouldn't. Well, they gave me all the questions in advance, but obviously nobody's doing that here. So.
No, I mean, listen, you were just.
What are we, Fox News?
No, absolutely no.
Who gave Trump all the questions in advance for that town hall that nobody cares about?
It was Fox, right?
Crazy, huh?
It is interesting too because they want to sue 60 Minutes and CBS because like they edited.
What do you even have? What is the standing? Trump wants to
because it hurt his feelings, Stephen.
Trump wants to sue 60 Minutes because they didn't like a trailer that they put out for Kamala's answer to an Israel thing because they felt what do we even talk? And so we memed about it a little bit earlier, but wanting to sue the Seltzer pollster in Iowa, wanting to sue them.
Yeah, and then also Trump called for the. I think it was the business license or an FCC investigation into one of the networks which did the debate. I think it was one of the debates. It was either the VP debate or his debate with Vice President Harris. He demanded that there be some sort of investigation because there was an anonymous allegation that they fed her the questions. Then, of course, to your point, we just find out a couple of days ago that according to a book that's coming out, a Fox News employee fed the Trump campaign questions before town hall. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. You've referenced at multiple points the email, the Hillary's emails and stuff like that. But all throughout the Trump administration, they were like doing shit on their cell phones too.
No one gave a fuck.
Yeah, exactly. It's frustrating. But anyway, great interview with Ben Wikler.
Yeah, he seemed like a cool guy.
He is a cool guy. Yeah, 100%.
By the time we're done with the series, we have to figure out if we're going to endorse somebody or not. And then the DGG Army. Sorry, running America mode.
The Dolly Parton. Yeah.
The DGG Army is going to figure out who we're going to throw our weight behind. So.
Well, it's going to single-handedly, secure.
It might.
Or might single-handedly.
People don't realize this, but over half of the DNC committee people in the DNC are DGGers.
Well, again, because of your close alliance with George Soros, right?
Of course.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen. I think
True.
Are we not supposed to talk about that, or that everybody knows about?
I'm like
that, right?
1% paranoid that something will get clipped, and it's like George Soros supporting the guy who interviewed DNC candidate. But I don't. They're
gonna say that sort of shit. Yeah, and also they would say that shit anyway, right? I mean, my God. I liked a lot of his answers on what he had to say. So one of my things is I love the fact that he acknowledged about the asymmetry in the media because I feel like some other people like downplay it. It's also really frustrating about like certain Democratic figureheads like, do you think that there's asymmetrical media? No, I don't think so. I just think that we got a message better. Like he was very blunt. He was like, yeah, we have the greater burden. And the right, he said, is all about power. That was like a big one for me. Like he went to Fox News recently and he had an interview on America's Newsroom with I'm blanking on her name. Dana Perino. She used to be a Bush press secretary, and she's a tough interviewer, especially when like liberals are on. And he gave a really good interview. But I love the fact that he doesn't bullshit about what the Republican Party has become. He's willing to go and have these conversations in hostile territory. But he says it's really not about principle. It's just all about power.
Now that we've talked to Mr. Wickler, I don't know if we announced anybody else.
Chairman
Wickler, comrade.
Yeah.
Chairman Wickler of the
because
Wisconsin Party.
Again, that's not us talking about the DNC chair. He is the chairman, remember, of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. Yeah.
For 6 years.
Yeah.
We need to get Pete Buttigieg on. He needs to be here for our next candidate interview. Pete, if you're listening, and by Pete I mean Pisco, email him.
Pete Sco.
Get him out here.
Yeah. I mean, I wonder what he's going to do. He's Secretary of Transportation. He's no longer mayor. I think he's living in Michigan now. Do you think Pete Buttigieg is done, or do you think he goes back into politics?
Isn't he pretty young?
Yeah,
He's
no.
in his 30s,
No. It's not an age thing. I'm just saying, like people talk about, like Harris, like Vice President Harris. What's her, she ran for president and lost, which isn't to say that she can't run again, but what are you going to do for the next 4 years? Be governor of California? Going to run for, because Newsom's term locked. I think he's got 2 years left in his term. How we get on the subject? You have me going down the rabbit hole. We're talking about Ben Wikler. What did you think of the interview? Let me ask you. Let me interview you. What did you think of Mr. Wikler?
Yeah, it seemed great.
Well, that's great. We can wrap it up now.
I think something that's interesting is there's been no visibility for this election ever.
No.
I don't even know if there's a lot of visibility now, or if I'm just trying to spotlight it more because I'm trying to find. One of the things he said that I actually liked is and this is actually really important. We know this from personal psychology, is if somebody's trying to goal set, small achievable goals is way better than one grand overarching goal, because you just feel like shit when you miss it every time. And we've almost taken a third party approach to politics in the Democratic Party, where it's the Democratic presidential election, and after that, it's who the fuck cares?
No, I mean, you brought that up during the conversation. I think it's worthwhile. I mean, I'm a politics geek. I struggle with this too. There's something that's particularly, attention getting about national level politics, or even gubernatorial races or whatever. But I
think it hurts us particularly too, because we're so national and international being on YouTube, right? That it feels a little different. Whereas if we were on a local
I'm
radio,
national, you're international, buddy. Come on,
you're international. I'm interplanetary, intergalactic.
Exactly.
Okay?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, you're like Galactus. Yeah.
Yeah. But the issue that you run into is because our audiences are so broad, you kind of want to appeal to everybody, but maybe more local. But we're still finding ways to do it, yeah.
Well, I mean, you referenced it, you mentioned it in passing, and then I think, again, Ben mentioned it, you expounded a bit more, but going back to my state, North Carolina, not to make it all about us, even though we probably should. It's a very important purple state. Big deal. It's gerrymandered to hell and back. Republicans have entrenched themselves, because, again, they understand power in ways we just don't. We really don't. Once they get power, they will reshape institutions to entrench it. And we have a Supreme Court seat that's up, and let's be clear, it's not going to change the balance of the court. If the liberal justice, the incumbent Justice Allison Riggs, if she wins her seat, it's still there's still a Republican supermajority, I believe. But right now, they're going to hear a case that will potentially just decide the outcome, even though recount after recount shows her winning. That's something that people should be talking about, even at the national level. That's something that Destiny should be talking about. Pondering Politics, Brian Tyler Cohen covers it as well, because there is a trickle-down effect. Wisconsin's a great example. Wisconsin was almost, you might have to correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but I'm pretty sure Wisconsin was one of the places where Trump tried to challenge the outcome of the 2020 election using, Wisconsin was one of the states he filed suit.
I think one of the wacky ones, yeah.
But the Supreme Court, by one conservative defected, they refused. The case never made it that far. And so these state, races matter.
They also matter because they just show you what you can do, right? I don't know if I'm safe saying this, but I think some people would say that the Supreme Court legalizing gay marriage, I say legalizing gay marriage, that's a load of things about the Supreme Court, but the Supreme Court allowing for gay marriage or making that a protected thing might have come off the back of states kind of slowly legalizing it, or at least civil unions in that direction. And it might be the case that we'll finally, it's so insane to think that marijuana is still a federally illegal Schedule 1 drug. Maybe that would come off the back of.
I think President Biden ordered its declassification, but I don't even know where that is in the process at this point. I don't know if that's done. He was supposed to deschedule it or whatever.
Yeah, but it's just, all of it is just but this might might come off the back of winning, state fight after state fight after state fight. And maybe people fleeing from Georgia or driving from Georgia to Florida to have access to, like women's health care. Maybe that would be a positive story for Florida. But these little fights are brutal. I still can't believe that fucking referendum bullshit in fucking Florida, that you needed 60% to get abortion. Somebody brought out that there were states that, I don't remember, it wasn't Colorado, I don't remember, there were states that voted in fewer percentage points that got abortion than Florida did it. What the fuck?
Ohio actually tried to pull something similar where they tried to raise the threshold for a referendum because they knew they were going to lose. Even like abortion referenda, conservatives have been defeated in Kentucky, Kansas, and other places, Ohio, and they tried to do the same thing Florida did. But again, it just goes back to Republicans understand power in a way that Democrats don't. And, I think that it was interesting to hear, Ben talk about how we have to just be very careful about picking the fights, because I felt like he was talking to me while I was listening, which is like, you can't get hung up on the hypocrisy thing. And I'm not going to speak for you, but I know that that's something that triggers me. Like, it's like, this fucking standard that you constantly abuse. And
because as soon as you talk about policy, you're appealing to things that very few, less than 5% of Americans understand or even care about.
Yeah, but do you, because I feel like you also get triggered about hypocrisy.
Super triggered, yeah.
When he's basically like, you just got to let that go and pick like certain fights and don't make it about hypocrisy. Does that like...
Fuck him.
How's that feel?
That's a Merrick Garland ad. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, I enjoy covering that, so I will. But it's good to also focus on, like, you can walk and chew gum at the same time, yeah, right? It's also good to focus on the small winnable things as well, which is one of the reasons why, with the help of my wonderful friends, Pisco and Joanna, and Leo and everybody else, and Alex and too, that we're setting up these like conversations to kind of like spotlight some of these more local... This isn't really a local issue, but like of these like less talked about positions that are of pretty big importance. And he brought up, it's the Wisconsin Supreme Court next year? This year. Yeah.
And that could flip. Let's be very clear. The difference is not that the North Carolina Supreme Court's not important. It is, because we need to chip away at that Republican supermajority. Mm-hmm. When you and DGG canvassed in 2023, in part because of what you all did, you flipped, the Supreme Court, and that helped Democrats, like he said, actually unfuck a lot of Wisconsin. It could flip again. Like if we win, that would enable us to further, entrench that majority, or we could just lose it again. Mm-hmm. So it's really, really important, because we could just undo all of the shit that we did for the past 2 years.
Another thing that he brought up, there's more, as I realized that all of life is like all of life and everything is the same, and I see the mirroring of being a streamer versus being a president or whatever else. There's just a funny thing, one thing I mentioned as a streamer is that like anytime there's like a thing going on, like visibility is really important, whether that means uploading continuously or whether that means streaming constantly to kind of like keep yourself relevant, keep yourself in the eyes of the people, and to be responsive of and aware of the kind of stuff that's happening. I hope that whether it's the chair of the Democratic Party or whatever, we need more visible like people in the Democratic Party, because every fucking truth, every tweet, everything that goes out from the Republicans is so visible to everybody. And I think that actually is a big deal. I think that helps a lot keep Trump and everything else on people's minds, because he's constantly messaging.
He's just everywhere, yeah, and he's on every available platform. Mm-hmm. But to your point, like, I mean, because we have a pretty deep bench as far as like talent in the Democratic Party. You mentioned Pete Buttigieg. AOC is probably the closest thing to a genuine celebrity that we have who is in politics. Mm-hmm. But then, like, who else? Like, the talent's there, but what about, like, the name recognition, the visibility, and things like that? And I'm not holding my breath that the DNC chair will be the next, like, like TikTok sensation or whatever. But you're right. Like,
so they don't have to be. They just need to, I think, empower those people to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, and really, like Ryan's made it his mission, and everybody else, you're talking about it, grow the ecosystem as much as possible. And it's got to be a feedback loop, because again, I can say from personal experience, it's been a hell of a lot easier to get like senators and Congress people on my channel, like, to interview them than it was before the election. Sure. Like, it still happened occasionally, but they were very hard to pin down. I think there's the sentiment, like, I think that there's a registration on all of them. Like, damn, we really seeded the ground in the media, and we've got a lot of catching up to do. But
yeah, well, any other political thoughts you'd like to ponder?
I see what you did there. Now, listen, it was a pleasure coming down here, hanging out with you,
Coming up here, right? For you.
Coming up here, you're right. Seeing, a third of the hearing, and watching you conduct.
I think by the end, I
masterclass
think we got
interview.
half. Because we went back and we watched Kane and
We watched
Warren. We got half of it.
I don't think that's how that works. I think we got about maybe a third, an hour out of the 3.
Okay, well, somebody will go back and fact check you on that. Well, but not on Facebook. But
no, not at all, because fact checkers don't exist, and anyone who does fact check me will probably be in Texas.
True. Thank God for Austin fact checkers.
We should definitely pay close attention to the Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel hearings. I don't know if they've been scheduled yet, but I have no doubt they're coming up. And I'll do a wellness check on you during those things. Be like, how's your blood pressure?
Listen, I have fun. Wellness check is for you and Pisco. Okay.
Pisco, I think. Listen, Pisco can cling to the fact that Merrick Garland was Attorney General. That comforts him at night. I'm the one who's a stress wreck at all times.
Pisco he's turning a warrior on Twitter. You notice that?
He is, man.
He's out. He's in the trenches.
He's got Pisco's Hour now on YouTube, and yeah. You guys should bring back the Twitter Spaces where you yell at conservatives for.
Yeah, we should. I just don't know what the point. I don't even know. If they come on, they're like, we're like, isn't Elon really bad? And they're like, yeah. So it's like, okay.
Yeah, but I think it's cathartic. It's certainly cathartic to listen to.
To scream at them. Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, man, I appreciate it. I was excited to watch your Ben Wikler interview. You've got some more coming up. Can you even talk about any of that?
Am I allowed to?
I don't know. I assume so. Everybody, Wikler knows you talk to some of the other people.
We're talking to all of them, I think. All of them. All the DNC candidate guys.
Nice.
Yeah. And Pete Buttigieg is going to be here next time. Absolutely. I'm excited to announce that. He just DM'd me.
He did? He's
Yep.
like, yo, Steve, what up?
And I'm like, what's up?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, he's making sure I'm first class today because transportation secretary, he can guide my plane home safely.
Watch both of our flights be delayed now. So, all right. Yeah, appreciate it,
thanks
buddy.
a lot. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I think I'm normal streaming tomorrow. We'll see. Yeah. Have fun. Peace out.